Flowing Anointing Church stood proudly at the center of Ikeja, its wall spires glistening under the morning sun, known for its quality and the miracle that happened within its wall. The church attracted thousands of worshippers every week. People spoke in calm admiration tone about the man who led the church, Pastor Julius. To the outside world, he was a beacon of light, a man of God who could call down blessings from heaven. But Pastor Julius' journey to this point was far from ordinary. Born into a deep religious home, Julius was the eldest son of Mr. John and Mrs. Elizabeth. John was a devoted man who loved God with all his heart. He raised his children with strict discipline, teaching them the importance of prayer and godly living. Elizabeth, ever supportive, ensured that the family stayed united in their faith. Young Julius showed great promise. As a boy, he memorized Bible verses with ease and led prayers during family devotions. His parents believed he was destined to be a man of God, and Julius himself dreamed of one day leading a church. But as he grew older, an insatiable desire for recognition began to creep into his heart. He watched over other pastors rise to fame, drawing large crowds and commanding wealth and respect. Slowly, Julius' innocent dream became tainted by ambition. By the time he was in his 20s, Julius had stumbled across a group that promised him supernatural power. They called themselves the Brotherhood of the Dark Flame. Their leader, a shadowy figure named Omalicha, convinced Julius that he could have everything he wanted: fame, fortune, and influence, if only he pledged his loyalty to them. Julius hesitated at first. He knew his parents could be heartbroken if they ever found out, but the lure of power was too strong, and he eventually gave in. Years later, Julius was married to Anita, a kind and virtuous woman. She adored him and believed wholeheartedly in his calling. They were blessed with 2 children, Toby and Simi, who brought light and laughter into their home. Anita had no idea about the secret meetings her husband attended late at night or the dark rituals he performed. To her, Julius was a man of God, and she supported him in every way she could. Flowing Anointing Church grew rapidly under Julius' leadership. Members flocked to the church, drawn by stories of breakthroughs that occurred during his services. The sanctuary was always packed, with ushers working tirelessly to find seats for everyone. On Sunday morning, the atmosphere in the church was powerful. The choir, dressed in flowing robes, filled the air with powerful hymns. Ushers greeted members with warm smile, and the congregation sang with all their hearts. As Julius ascended the pulpit, the crowd erupted in applause. He raised his hands, calling for silence, and commanding, and began his sermon. His voice was rich and commanding, his words weaving a powerful narratives about faith and perseverance. After the sermon came to the miracle section, the part of the service everyone waited for. Julius stepped down from the pulpit, his suit gleaming under the bright light. "Come forward," he said, his voice echoing through the hall. "The Lord is here to meet your needs." The congregation surged forward, each person desperate for his touch. The first was a woman who had been unable to walk for years. Julius laid his hands on her head and closed his eyes. She gasped and then stood up, her legs steady beneath her. The crowd erupted in cheers and shouts of praise. But something sinister was happening beneath the surface. As Julius performed each miracle, his head began to transform into a beastly shape, a horn protruding from his forehead. This transformation was invisible to the crowd, but Jesus could feel it. The beast within him grew in satisfaction as he absorbed the glory of those he touched. One by one, the members fell under his touch, claiming healing and deliverance, unaware that their destiny were being stolen. The beast fed greedily, its hunger momentarily satisfied. The scenario went on and on. Initially, Pastor Julius, being a greedy man, was not satisfied with the powers he had received from the first occultic group. Despite the growing success of his church, he yearned for more. Every time he drove past another pastor in a luxury car or saw pictures of their sprawling homes and expensive lifestyles, envy burned within him. Julius felt his achievements were insignificant compared to others in the ministry. The thought haunted him. Why should they be more successful than me? I deserve more, he would say to himself. One evening, a particular extravagant church where he had performed countless miracles, Julius sat in his dimly light study room. His eyes lingered in the glossary pages of a magazine featuring a well-known pastor standing proudly in the front of a fleet of luxury cars. The envy that had been in his mind for years now boiled over. This isn't enough, he muttered, holding his two hands together. It was then he decided to seek out another society that would elevate him to even greater heights. After weeks of inquiries and secretive meetings, he was introduced to the circle of eternal flame, or organization even darker and more dangerous than the brotherhood of the dark flame. The initiation rituals were horrible, unlike the first group, which only required small sacrifices. The circle demanded more, constant spiritual offerings and unwavering commitments. Julius was one. The deeper you go, the harder it will be to live. But Julius didn't care. All he could think about was the wealth and fame he believed awaited him. In return for his commitment, Julius gained the ability to perform even more spectacular miracles. His church grew exponentially. Members flocked in by the hundreds, captivated by his anointing. But they were unaware that each miracle came at a cost: their destiny. Their spiritual glory and their blessing were being siphoned away. The impact of his newfound power was immediate. Julius upgraded his lifestyle dramatically. He purchased a fleet of luxury cars, including the latest model of Lexus called Lexus GLs. His mansion in the heart of Ikeja became the talk of the town. A palace with marble floors, crystal light features, and imported furniture. At church, Julius took every opportunity to flaunt his wealth. He arrived in convoy, flanked by bodyguards, his suit glittering in the sunlight. Worshippers whispered in surprise about how God had truly blessed him. But behind the scene, the demand of his occultic agreement began to weigh heavily on him. The circle of eternal flame required regular sacrifices of spiritual energy, and the brotherhood of the dark flame was not willing to share its vessel. Julius' life became a dangerous balancing account. The two groups demanded more and more from him, each threatening severe consequences if he failed to deliver. The once confident pastor now lived in constant fear, though he hid it well behind his charming appearance. The miracles in his church became more elaborate, but so did the darkness behind them. During church services, as Julius laid hands on the congregation, a bristly form within him grew more pronounced. Its horn glowed faintly, and its malevolent laughter echoed in his mind as it fed on the glory of those he touched. One day, after a particular draining service, Julius returned home and slumped into his armchair. Anita noticed the exhaustion on his face. "Are you okay, my husband?" she asked gently. "I'm fine," he replied in a short and rude way, waving her away. But Anita wasn't convinced. Something about Julius has changed over the years, and she couldn't ignore the unease that crept into her heart. Later that night, as Julius sat in his study room, he opened a drawer containing two small idols, one representing each of the occultic group he belongs to. He stared at them, his hands trembling. He knew he was in too deep. "This will end badly," a voice whispered in his mind. But Julius shook it off, convincing himself that he could manage the demands of both societies. Unknown to him, cracks were beginning to form in his carefully constructed world. The circle of eternal flame had started to suspect his divided loyalty, and the brotherhood of the dark flame was growing impatient with his constant excuses. For months, Pastor Julius had carefully balanced his commitment to the brotherhood of the dark flame while secretly pursuing more powers. He thought he could outsmart them, fulfilling just enough of their demands to keep them satisfied. But he underestimated the darkness he had aligned himself with. The brotherhood leaders began to notice something was amiss. Julius' excuses for delayed sacrifices, his inconsistent participation in rituals, and the unexplained surges in his church powers raised suspicions. One night, during a meeting in their hidden chamber, the high priest, known as the Strong, addressed the council. "Julius has betrayed us," he said, his voice a low glow that sent shivers through the assembly. "The fool think he can serve another power alongside with us? He has mocked our covenant, and he will pay the ultimate price," the high priest echoed. The council murmured in agreement. Betrayal was the grievous sin in their order, and the punishment was always severe. "We will confront him in the place he holds most dear, his church," the Strong declared, his tone final. It was a sunny Sunday morning, and Flowing Anointing Church was packed as usual. The congregation murmured in an excited manner, eager to witness the miracle that had become the hallmark of Pastor Julius' ministry. Julius, dressed in a clean white suit, strode confidently to the pulpit. He raised his hands and the crowd fell silent. "Today," he began, his voice ringing out, "God is going to do something extraordinary in your lives." The choir sang, the congregation prayed, and Julius began laying hands on those who came forward for healing. As usual, his bristly form emerged in the spiritual realm, invisible to the congregation. The beast roared, feeding on the glory of those he touched, and Julius felt a surge of power coursing through him. But then, the air in the church shifted. A chilling wind swept through the sanctuary, extinguishing the candles and dimming the lights. Gasps and murmurs spread through the crowd. "What's happening?" Anita whispered from the children's section, holding her children close. Suddenly, a blind light filled the room, followed by a thunderous voice, "Julius!" And so, my dear listener, thank you very much for watching to this interesting story. To stay updated when I post the part 2 of this story, please kindly click on the subscribe button, like, share and comment to stay updated. Thank you very much for watching. See you in the next episode.